everyone, and welcome to Outdoor Explorer. I'm Adam Verrier, and today my guest here in Studio A is Randall Carlton Green. Randall is a globetrotting world traveler who's recently published a book called Smart and Solo, The Blueprint for Efficient and Enjoyable Solo Travel. The book is described by Randall as a Valentine for those who wish to not only travel solo, but who also aspire to efficiently and effectively globetrot by themselves. Randall Carlton Green, welcome to Outdoor Explorer.
Thank you. And being described as a globetrotter, well, I don't think there's anything better than to be described as that. So thank you for that.
You've written this book called Smart and Solo, and I'll just call it Smart and Solo, although the title is longer than that. Yeah. It's based on your own travels. Mm-hmm. You're here in Alaska. You're on one of your travels, and we just happen to catch you and get you into the studio here to talk to us today.
Exactly.
How long have you been traveling your whole life, or is this kind of a recent development for you?
No, it was a recent development, and I come from a unique background. My mom's from England, so I have dual citizenship, so it was kind of ingrained on me at a young age. However, it wasn't until I was older that actively started doing it, and it was I was working as a teacher, and I had a second job, so my time was minimum when it came to actually being able to travel, and being single and friends. I had families and everything, and what I initially started with my trips was I was for baseball, big baseball fan, so I wanted to see all 30 of the Major League Baseball parks because they vary in size, shape, color, whatnot. But when I was looking for people to go with me, and with my unique schedule and everything, it was, hey, you want to go to Detroit on Tuesday? And then it was a silence response most of the time. It was, okay, fine. How about Baltimore? And again, I love those cities. I love those places. But finding people to go with you, it was very difficult. So I just started traveling by myself. And it started off just baseball. And then it maybe a couple other sports. Went to Philadelphia, and then it progressed to international travel. But that's where the root of it was. Just I was trying to do the baseball trips.
And so these were short trips. Mm-hmm. You were living in Arizona at the time,
yes,
Chicago?
Yes, Arizona.
Okay. Have you ever lived in Chicago? Somehow I feel like...
that was one of the initial... when I first talked to you, I did a interview in WGN.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's where the Chicago comes from. So these trips, you'd make relatively spontaneous trips, just a few days in advance. And what would cause you to... you're looking to go to these different baseball stadiums. Mm-hmm. But what would be the impetus for a particular trip? Was it airplane pricing, or were you methodically working your way across the country to all these baseball stadiums?
At that point, probably a little bit of both. But I know at that point in my age, it probably came down to affordability more than anything. That was probably the initial one. But it was definitely a little bit of methodology of trying to do all of them and trying to do. I think one of the first ones I did was Toronto, but it was just trying to find out what worked out best. But with 30, I knew I actually had almost like a 30-year plan of doing it. I've since done more than that, but at the time it was like a very long, slow grind process.
And what were people's excuses for not coming with you? I mean, because people had to come up with excuses. They couldn't just say no.
I think they said no. Well, I think, but also it was also just it wasn't the response. It was the lack of response.
Yeah.
It was, hey, you want to go to Detroit?
Right.
No response.
Yeah.
Hey, you want to go to Baltimore? Okay. All right. So it was definitely, and then the person I'm actually here in Alaska with, one of the ones I was like, hey, I'm going to LA, and he was there. So some of them worked out, but for the most part, it was just a lack of response. Just that, that red text message that never got responded to. So.
Right. Well, I'm in your book, in the introduction to your book, I found that the first sentence in the book really interesting for me, because I haven't experienced this myself. But I'll read it because I thought this was really interesting. When I first, this is the first sentence from your book. When I first started traveling by myself, I was embarrassed. During each trip, I would irrationally feel as if everyone was looking at me differently. Several times, I would make up creative stories to provide myself an alibi for why I was in another city or a country alone. And when I returned, I always dreaded the most common question of, who did you go with? Mm-hmm. And so this, what made you feel embarrassed about traveling by yourself?
Well, insecurity, of course, number one. And then in my times in researching this, it's a common theme or common phenomenon that we have. It's called the spotlight effect. Scientific aspect of when we go into public places, we feel as if everyone is looking at us, no matter what it is. You go to eat, we feel as everybody there, if we're eating by ourselves, knows that person's eating by themselves, which makes him an inferior person. He has no friends, or he got stood up, or whatever it may be. And I had the same thing. And a lot of it was immaturity and just the fact that I hadn't done a lot of it. So I thought everyone was going to know, he's traveling by himself, so there must be something wrong with him. And then afterwards, you went somewhere by yourself, and then I always thought people would just judge me differently initially. So that was why I was borderline ashamed, but I was embarrassed, and I would concoct stories of just saying my friend's coming, he's on his way, or she's on his way, they're on a different flight. I'm looking for them, or fake phone calls, all the above. That's how I started, because I was definitely very insecure at the commencement of the travels.
Well, the thing that I found interesting about that first paragraph in your book was that I've heard that from other people. I mean, I've heard it commonly from other people, because I travel by myself a lot, both for work, where I'm traveling every week. I'm on planes sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, and then in my own recreational travel, I travel by myself. It's just something I'm comfortable with, and I always have been. But when people ask me what have I got planned next week? Oh, I'm going to go on a motorcycle trip by myself, and I'll just be hanging out by myself for a few weeks or something like that. People will very frequently say, that is weird. What? Why? I would not like that at all. And so you're not the first person to say that.
Yeah, but luckily though, the weird responses, I've got those, but it wasn't until that first time. I don't even remember where it was, what city, what location. I was on one of the international trips. I'd heard the weird responses before, friends, well, mostly friends, but it was, wow, that's amazing. Once I heard that for the first time, it changed everything, and it said, this is actually something I should be proud of. And initially, I did think, yeah, it is weird, and I am weird. But then when someone said, that's pretty cool, they followed with, that's really cool, I could never do that. It was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I suppose I've heard the exact same thing.
I'm proud of that now.
I couldn't do that. And I think that I've mostly heard that from people younger than me. It seems that as people get older, maybe they become more comfortable with solo travel. I don't know if you've seen that. Maybe that's not the case.
Well, I know as a personal experience, as I've become older, I care less about it. When as an 18-year-old, I would never have done it. I would have cared too much about what people thought. But right now, it's more people are traveling by themselves solo than ever before, and it is slowly becoming something. Just with so much thing with our culture, with people are getting married later, so that's less. That's more opportunity to be by yourself. So there is that stigma of being by yourself. It is slowly dropping. It still exists to a degree, but I'd say for anyone who still has any doubts, go travel by yourselves, and you will immediately find how much you love it, and you won't even care if there's a stigma. Because someone asked me that when I was in Oregon last week, was what I thought about other people when they were thinking. And I said, well, the second I stopped worrying about what other people thought, they asked me about, well, what do your family members think? Did they support your solo travel? And I said, initially, they thought it was weird, but now I don't care what they think. And once I changed my mindset to not worrying about who cares if it is weird. If it's weird that I'm a solo traveler, fine. I'm the weirdest guy alive. That's fine.
Well, clearly you're an advocate for solo travel, but even below that, you're an advocate for travel. Why should people travel? Why should anybody travel?
Yeah. I'm an advocate for any type of travel. Most of the time when people talk about the book, they're like, well, I can't travel by myself. And I say, well, that's fine. But travel is important. Travel provides 3 things. Every single person who's ever traveled in this world, from the initial people exploring the worlds in boats and ships, Christopher Columbus, you name it, it provides 3 things. First, it provides an education. You learn something. You always learn something. Now, you go across the horizon, there's something new across the horizon that you're going to learn. You go to the grocery store, you're going to learn something new. Second thing it provides is adventure, and I call that the fun. We were up in Denali, we had fun. It was the adventure aspect. You're doing something that's entertaining and fun. But the third and the most important thing is it provides opportunity. In the past, it might be someone who's looking for a new career, new riches, escaping a violent situation, or escaping a country that they need to leave, or whatever it may be. It provides opportunity. It could be someone who meets their wife. It could be someone who finds a new job. It could just, over the horizon, you never know what's going to be there. So the opportunity to have education, adventure, but then opportunity is everyone should search it out, solo or with people. You never know what's on the next horizon.
It was clear from your book that that curiosity, it seems, for you is a big impetus for your travel. And perhaps your curiosity, even your first example, was about going around and looking at seeing ballparks, which that had to just be mostly curiosity.
That's all I want to be. I want to be curious, and I want to be interested in the world, and I want to see every place that exists is a reason to go. People always ask, well, why do you want to go to this place? Because it exists. For me, every place I can learn something. Every person I meet, I can learn something. And so I'm just curious, and I want to learn, and I want to be around every culture and just be around as much as possible. And I feel that I can have an hour-long conversation with someone like yourself or just other travelers. That's perfect for me. That's a perfect day.
Where have you... we started this conversation with talking about traveling to around North America to ballparks. But do your travels tend to go further afield? Do they tend to be more in North America, or how far have you traveled? And
presently, I think I'm at 30 countries, and it's been mostly North America and Europe. I still continue to do the baseball trips when I can, and with the book, I've been doing some local West Coast tours, and I have one coming up on the East Coast as well in New York. Internationally, though, right now, I'm mostly at Europe. The affordability, every time I look to go somewhere else, Europe is always just extremely more affordable, which someone might hear that might be surprised to hear that, but it is when you compare it to some of the other continents. But I'm on about 30 countries, most of them in Europe, and I'm a Francophile, so I love everything about France, and I love everything about Europe, and then with family and living in England as well.
I suppose that the family in England provides a lot of excuses to a lot of excuses to go to England. Do you go there frequently?
Yeah, I'll be going back this December. Yeah, I'm going to catch our local team, Sheffield United, just got promoted to the Premier League, so I'm going to go catch a match with them as well.
Okay, all right. You describe your transition from traveling with other people to traveling solo as something that came by necessity. That people you couldn't get people to go along on a trip, so you had to go by yourself.
Yeah.
But now it sounds like there's been a bit of a flip where you now may prefer to go by yourself. And what's the purpose in traveling by yourself? What advantages are there to traveling by yourself as opposed to traveling with others?
First and foremost, and maybe the most important, but it's the selfish reasons. First of all, right? The selfish reasons. I go where I want. I go however long I want. Sometimes when you maybe are at a museum with someone else, you ever been in a museum and you're staring at a famous painting or something, and you feel like there's like an obligatory time that you have to spend at it. You know, you feel like everybody's looking at me. I should spend exactly 30 seconds looking at the Mona Lisa or whatever. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't want to disrespect.
Yeah. And
Picasso.
if you're with someone else, you're like, are they enjoying this? Should I? What do I got to do? You're by yourself. I've looked at paintings. Boom, bounce to the next one. Gone over. And those things. And you leave early. You do whatever you want. So first and foremost, that is why I enjoy solo travel. Is I do whatever I want to do. I go when I want to go, and I can jump ship. I can spend the least amount of time I want. I've spent an hour in country, and I've spent whatever it is. So selfishly, yes, that's the first part, is just I can do what I want. But the other part of it is that when you're by yourself, you're more inclined to make mistakes, right? How many times you're driving, if you have someone with you, they can say, hey, no, you missed a turn or whatever it may be, or you go to the wrong place. But when you're by yourself, you're going to have more opportunity to make mistakes. So that's number one. And because of that, making those mistakes, you got to figure it out. You're going to miss a flight. You're going to miss a train. You're going to go to the wrong place. And when you're by yourself, you can't call mom, you can't call dad. You just got to figure it out. And those mistakes and that growth is probably the single most beneficial part of solo travel, is that you realize what you can do, you realize what you can accomplish. In the book, I talk about one of the situations that happened to me was I was lost in the labyrinth that is Venice, Italy, one of my favorite cities, but every building's the same height, meandering waterways all throughout it, and I got lost coming home. And Venice is a small town, but I still was lost almost to the point of tears. Where actually at one point I screamed out, I said, "I need help," because this was at nighttime, not a lot of people around, and the walkways, there's no road signs, and even if they are, I don't, I didn't know Italian, so as I'm wandering around, and I was so frustrated. Finally figured it out. Went into a restaurant, figured it out, had several glasses of wine. I think a chicken parmesan was wonderful, but then I sat there and I thought to myself, if I can get through another city, another language, and I can do something as small as get back to the hotel, what can't I do? And it wasn't, it was when I got back to the States and I thought about things like that. It's like, you can do hard things, Randall. Sometimes we need those affirmations. If you're a distance runner or anything, it's once you've broken a certain distance, I can run 26 miles. So for me, it's something like, I can do hard things. I can navigate a country I've never been to before. And having that is just a sense of satisfaction, makes you proud, and then the rest of life's easy. You can get through another country. You can handle any problem that's going to be thrown your way.
Yeah, and Italy is a place which, still being a European country, it's relatively similar culturally to North America. And so it's, even though, and Italy can be kind of a bizarro place. Every time that I was traveling, when I was skiing on the ski team, and we would cross over into Italy, we would tell whatever new person who hadn't been ski racing yet in Italy, we would say, well, we're crossing into Italy. So the buses are going to run completely opposite what the schedule says. All the street signs are going to point you in the opposite direction. The places that you think will be open will be closed, and the places you think will be closed are actually open. And we will screw up, and we will get stuck somewhere in some big miscommunication, probably within the next couple hours, and that's going to continue until we leave Italy, and that's just the way it's going to be.
It's the way it's going to be.
And it always was.
Yeah. Every time I've been to Italy, there's been, first of all, don't try to do anything early in the morning.
Right.
They're on a slower schedule. Everything happens a little later. We missed. I had someone with me on my last flight, and we left the luggage. Luggage opened at 8, and we were leaving the airport at 7:55, and they refused to let us get the luggage, and so he had to leave his luggage at the airport. So yeah, Italy. But yeah, you got to know those things, and I'm sure you were up north in the northern parts. I haven't been in the northern part, but just Venice, all those. It's great. But again, it's another part of the greatest parts about travel is just seeing those things and knowing that if another country is slower to wake up or earlier to go to bed, or whatever they may do, you realize that what we do is not necessarily right. There is no black and white right way to do anything in this world. So when you see other things, it just makes you appreciate just the different ways to do things.
Yes. Well, you're listening to Outdoor Explorer on Alaska Public Media. I'm Adam Verrier, and my guest today here in Studio A is Randall Carlton Green. He's the author of a book called Smart and Solo, The Blueprint for Efficient and Enjoyable Solo Travel. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. This is Outdoor Explorer, and I'm your host, Adam Verrier. I'm speaking with Randall Carlton Green. He's recently released a book titled Smart and Solo, The Blueprint for Efficient and Enjoyable Solo Travel. And just before the break, you had said something that I found interesting. You had said something about in different cultures, for example, in Italy, don't expect people to wake up early. It's a cult in those Romance countries, Spain, Italy. The daily schedule is a little different. There can be a siesta. The party dinner begins at 11 o'clock at night. It's a little bit different than further up north. I think you had referred to up north, and certainly in Scandinavia, in the Germanic countries, things run very differently.
Exactly.
The trains go exactly when they're supposed to go, and you better be there.
Yeah, exactly.
And you get scolded if you're not. Whereas I think down south, it's a little more lax. We'll figure something out. Have you been to other places that have that you found to be culturally different in ways that you've learned from? You had said that it's not necessarily that the way we do things is the right way.
100%. And I think any traveler, the first thing you should do is remember, this is not about you. So meaning, if you're going somewhere, so many of us are spoiled to think, well, they should speak English. Well, no, they shouldn't, first of all, do anything. So if, France gets a reputation for being, quote, rude because they don't speak as much English. No, they can speak English, but they're in France. They're going to speak French. So that's one thing. You notice, you mentioned Scandinavia. I can go on and on about how charming that area is as well. Everybody there's super polite, and can they speak English? Yeah, along with 5 other languages. So that's that. But the other part of it is not necessarily just location, but just type of cultures. So for instance, we're in the United States. We're used to having, when we travel and just standing in line, we're used to our personal bubble. We're used to no one getting in. And if someone gets in our personal bubble, what does someone in the United States do? Well, they take a picture of it and post it on social media and say, why is this guy in my space? You travel, and guess what? Someone's going to be in your personal bubble. And people from other cultures and places that have higher density populations, they're going to stand closer to you in line. And they're not being rude. They're just being themselves. That's not something that you can, say, why is this guy's, whatever. No, that's just what it is. And I think to travel, not only do you learn the culture of the locations you go to, but the culture of just the people around you as well.
I think it's, I think that we sometimes can feel suspicious about people from other cultures for political reasons, and it seems that travel may be an opportunity to see how people live in their little store that they're running on their farm, and with their lifestyle, and see that people around the world are trying to make a living. And I think that travel may provide an opportunity to understand the world a little bit better.
Yeah, you're right. I almost should add that onto my 4th thing that travel provides, but I think you can file it under education. I've had some amazing conversations with random people. I had one of the most wonderful conversations of my life in Scotland with a man from China. He was an engineering student, but at the University of Manchester, and we both happened to cross paths, and we were talking politics and things that he didn't know about us, and I didn't know about him, and he assumed that there was a gigantic wall around the the entire border and everything, and it was. So you learn that, and you learn to just appreciate just the different type of people that you meet. So definitely. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for? It sounds like communicating with other people in other countries is a big part of why you want to travel, and that solo travel gives you maybe a better opportunity to engage with people in the country that live in the countries that you're visiting than if you're with a group of people of your friends. Do you have any tips for how you might start a conversation or start a
Yeah, well, let me tell you the first one that I've come to love domestically. So even domestic, it doesn't travel for those who want to do solo travel. It doesn't have to be all international, and a lot of places you go they will speak. So the number one thing I've learned when I go places, is especially airports and places like with a lot of tourists and travelers, I lean over and I casually ask the person next to me and say, "Hey, I got the next round." And they usually look at me cautiously and concerned, like, "What is this? Why? What? Why?" And I say, "Oh, well, I don't drink by myself. I'm by myself." And then it just kicks off. And I've got to the point where I've even been at the Newark airport, where I went back and the bartender knew me the next time around, and just fantastic conversation with people. So that one thing I do is I buy anyone. If I'm by myself, I'll buy a drink. It doesn't have to be alcohol. Just buy a drink or buy something for the person next to me. And it's just a quick way to kickstart. That's number one. And then two, just be approachable if you want. And I think we can chat about for some people solo travel, they don't want to be social. But if you do want to be social, learn a few basic words before you go. There's a lot of different language applications out there. Learn the basics, and they'll know right away how much you can tell. They'll be able to tell by your accent, but they'll appreciate the effort, and then you can kickstart it there. I was in Barcelona, and I was trying my Spanish, and necesito más practicar en español, pero he stopped me and said, "No, I want to learn English. I want to go to Miami." He goes, "Miami." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So it was great. So learn a little bit of the language, just the basic ones. I practice French every day. Je pratique le français on Duolingo. And smile, make yourself approachable. I like having books with me as well because they can be conversation starters as well. And seek out other people by themselves, or seek out bartenders and servers. They're the liaisons for locations. So always ask with them. Ask the hostess. Ask the people at your hotel as well, if you so choose. And then for a lot of people, it's also they don't want to talk. And if you don't want to talk, then it still can be a valuable trip as well.
Well, I found when I was traveling, I spent a lot of time in Europe a long time ago when I was ski racing, and I speak not very good French and not that great German, but I do speak Norwegian and Swedish pretty well. But if you're in France and you can speak a little bit of French, but it's not very good, you speak your lousy French, and the French people may be embarrassed that their English isn't very good. So when you butcher French, it gives them an opportunity, I think, to say, "Oh no, don't do that to French anymore. I'll speak English with you." And that can be an opening right there. I think I find that people sometimes are embarrassed of their own relatively poor English skills, and when you try your German and it's worse than their English, they say, "All right, well, let's do this in English."
Well, and there's few universal words around the world. First of all, smile is the number one universal word around the world. Everybody knows what that means, and then knows you're approachable. But the other thing I found over time. Soccer or international football, and I was in Belgium, and he spoke no English, and my French is minimal, but I was able to say, it was like the weekend of Clásico, so I was able to say Real Madrid or Barca, and he kind of looked at me, Real Madrid. So that was a part of it, is just having that as well. And then we ended up hanging out and taking pictures together as well. One other thing I do is when you got to always I always have my phone ready. So when you jump in an Uber or a taxi in a lot of the foreign countries, most of the time they're not actually from the place you're at. So if you're in France, a lot of people are from Northern Africa, Morocco, and everything. So I always keep up a Wikipedia page ready to go. So when I ask the person, "Hey man, where are you from?" and they'll say, "Oh, I'm from Belgium," or wherever it is, and the first thing I'll do is I'll look it up and I'll. "Oh, so even if I don't know anything about the country, are you in this city, this specific city?" And they usually look at me like, "Oh, how do you know that?" And so I have my little cheat notes, my cheat sheet on the side of asking them questions on it. So that's a little.
Yeah, I believe that was in the book. That's in one of your. I think they're called Smart and Solo Travel Tips.
Yeah,
so the sidebars.
Different interviews from people around the world that I've met. I picked that up from someone else. Just always have it, because when you show interest to someone else, about their culture. It's one of the ways that we can connect, and it's amazing, and they'll appreciate it, and you can just see someone smile. Making someone smile and making someone's day, and when you don't know the language, is one of the most purest, most amazing connections that humans can have. Probably the most organically spiritual, perfect connection that you can make, when you can make someone else laugh or make someone else happy. It's incredible, and so by showing interest in someone else's culture, that's the first way to connect.
Yeah, you talked in your book about being a travel diplomat.
Oh.
Is that what you're referring to here?
Yeah, and I think that anyone who travels, you have the responsibility of you're not an American, you're not a Brit or whatever it may be, you're not from Arizona, you're not from Alaska, you are a travel diplomat, which means you have a higher function in this world. This is my own personal view. I view that anyone who has a traveler, I believe that we're more open-minded, we've seen more, and that we have a higher role in this world. We're interesting people. We're curious people. So in order to do that, in order with this privilege that we have of being interesting and curious, we need to continue to spread that by being someone who looks out for other travelers, who looks out for the local economy, local things, just to make the other areas better, and just to spread energy, positive energy, being a great person.
Well, and related to that, I believe you had spoken about what you call the Emerald Rule. What is the Emerald Rule? And is this? I haven't heard of the Emerald Rule before. Is this a Randall Carlton Green rule? Or
luckily enough, with the last name Green, I had to do something. So we all know the golden rule is just treat others how you'd like to be treated. So I just took that and I just said, as a traveler, simply put, this is my creation, and it's one thing I've worked on, and it's one thing I look for a lot to find other ways to do. When you travel, do whatever you can to leave the culture and the situation better than you found it. Now, that could be the environment. It also could just be making you smile as I meet you, or making your day better. One thing that I do everywhere I travel, I give away a new pack of socks everywhere I go. Socks are one thing everyone on the planet needs. So whenever I get off a train, or especially in Europe with the train stations, they're havens for people who are in between homes. I donate a pair of socks, brand new. I just walk up to someone and just give a pair of socks. Last time I did it was in Berlin, and he didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any German, but he knew what I was offering there, and they're helpful when they're new, as a pack of 3. And the next night I did it in Piccadilly Circus in London. And again, like I mentioned before, that connecting through cultures, through language, that language barrier connecting, it's one of the most amazing experiences. It's a spiritual experience, and I think that's part of the Emerald Rule for me, is just leaving this place better than I found it. And leaving, because with over tourism and with just so many people, when they do travel, they treat it as it's their spring break, where they don't care. How many times have we seen travelers in the past who might overindulge and not care, like, this isn't my country, I don't have to worry about it.
Somebody will clean it up.
Yeah, someone else will clean it up. Well, that might have been acceptable years ago. It's not anymore. With over tourism and just the way with our planet, we have to take care of it now. So for me, it's just to practice the Emerald Rule and to live the Emerald Rule that every traveler should do as an ambassador. We have to continue. If we want to continue to travel, we first of all got to take care of it, because if we don't, we're going to lose our number one passion. So do things like that. Seek out opportunities. There's opportunities where you can clean. In Copenhagen, there's if you go on a kayak tour, you can get a free kayak tour if you come back with a bucket of trash. So seeking out these opportunities.
So the operator will say, "Yeah, you can rent it for free. Just come back with a bucket of trash, and we'll call it good."
Yeah. And there's a lot of these places around. I have a bag with me with another one that I can help pick up trash. I hope to do it later on today when I go kayaking, picking up trash in the harbor and everything. And just there's numerous ways. In the book I talk about different ways to volunteer. We all know things like the Peace Corps, which are the big 2-year programs, but there's also ones where you can go day by day, and you can go volunteer and work on a French vineyard. And not only are you making the world a better place, but imagine your next job interview, right? When they ask you, tell me about your experience. Well, I just got back from the animal sanctuary in Costa Rica where we were helping turtles, and so there's a lot of different opportunities that you can help in travel that are going to both benefit the travel, but also and they're going to enact the Emerald Rule, but then they're going to make you just not only a better person, but it's going to increase your hireability and your resume and overall.
Yeah, it sounds like that's something that you could integrate into a selfish trip. I'm going to go to this place and spend 2 days helping out in this. I think that when I think of sort of going to another part of the world, or even another part of Alaska, and volunteering as trying to make the world a better place in some small way, I think Peace Corps, and I think, well, I can't really take 2 years. I'm in the middle of a career. I have a life here. I can't take 2 years and go off and build houses someplace. But certainly I can spend a day and a half. And so it sounds. Are you saying that there are organizations that help you find these opportunities to do short-term improvement?
Oh yeah, and if you need more motivation, is a lot of these places will provide lodging. So you come and work on their farm for the night, and these are all described in the Smart and Solo book, and so there are other opportunities for if you want to maybe find a way to go across Europe for free, or for not necessarily free, but for very affordable, then you can volunteer and just kind of hop and skip around different farms or different. You can be couriers or whatever it may be, just different opportunities. And there's also are paid ones. You might hear people where a lot of the ones when you hear people go to Africa are usually maybe religious based, or there is a fee, and those are fine too. If you have the means to do that as well, you can go to an animal sanctuary and provide that as well. But there are a lot of opportunities that through travel you can volunteer, and if you can combine the two, then I think that's a win-win situation for everybody, and it becomes addicting as well, because not only are you traveling, but you're also, like you mentioned, looking for opportunities to just spread the Emerald Rule.
Yeah. Well, you're listening to Outdoor Explorer right now on Alaska Public Radio. I'm Adam Verrier. My guest today is Randall Carlton Green, and he's the author of a book that's called Smart and Solo: The Blueprint for Efficient and Enjoyable Solo Travel. It was just released, I think, a couple of months ago. And we'll be right back after a short break.
You're listening to Outdoor Explorer on Alaska Public Media. Find the show anytime as a free podcast in the iTunes Store or connect with us online at alaskapublic.org.
Welcome back. This is Outdoor Explorer, and I'm your host, Adam Verrier. I'm speaking with Randall Carlton Green. He's got a book called Smart and Solo: The Blueprint for Efficient and Enjoyable Solo Travel, and he's stopped by the studio in the middle of one of his trips. Not a solo trip this time. He brought a couple buddies. I think he told you told him you were coming to Alaska, and they said, "We got to come. We're not missing this trip." Is that right?
You know, who knows? If I would have initially done this way back when, instead of doing this baseball attempt to go to these small cities, if I would have done Alaska, maybe the solo book would never have happened. But this was one. Now, actually, as I've become more of a, I don't want to use the word professional traveler yet, but I do like you've mentioned calling me a globetrotter. Now as I'm getting globetrotter, I'm getting more people who are reaching out to me saying, hey, can I tag along? Can I come? And that's fine. My goal when I started this was not to become this solo traveler who does everything by myself. I enjoy people. I've enjoyed talking with you. And it's just that I did it out of necessity, and I wasn't going to wait. Too many times we wait for things. We wait for opportunities like, I'll travel when, or all this and that. No, I'm going to go tomorrow. I'm not going to wait. And if it means I got to go by myself, then oh well.
Right, you're going through this transition where you traveled solo because nobody would go with you. Mm-hmm. Now you can't keep them away.
But I mean, I'm not at that stage yet. But hopefully, maybe one day it has been fun to actually have people want to travel with you and know your expertise. But that also was part of the reason with the inspiring of the book was that as I would come back, every time I would come back from a trip, I would sit down and tell people, all right, you need to do this, you need X, Y, and Z. This is the flight you should take. This is the best airline. You have the smallest layover. And I would go on and on and on. And then people would say, they would casually say, you need to write a book. And then it was finally, after a while, I was like, yeah, I should. Right. I've got a lot of built up information that not only do I have information, but if you notice that if you and I were talking, but the second you and I started talking about travel, I'm talking faster, I'm talking more high pitch because I care. I could talk with you about travel, about anything. I would love to hear about all your Scandinavian trips and everything. And just last night at the restaurant, I was talking about the guy from Belgrade, and we spoke for a half hour just talking about it. So I get excited about travel, as you can tell. So I love to talk about it, and that was part of it as well. And if it means the next book is smart and duo or however many it is, but I will gladly do that as well. So
how to do smart group travel with groups of 20 or more.
Exactly. Well, now you're pushing it.
So you spoke earlier. I heard you mention something about over-tourism. Mm-hmm. What's over-tourism, and what's the danger in over-tourism? What can you do as a traveler to? Well, first of all, what is it, and how do we avoid it?
Yeah, over-tourism is a new phrase. A lot of times if you type it in, it comes up as a spelling error because it's such a new term. It's just that over-tourism is the abuse that we cause in any way, shape, or form as travelers. It could be in places like Asia or South Asia, in Bali, and places like that are just that some of the beaches there, the famous beach that was in the movie The Beach, had to be shut down because the local mayor called it a cesspool because of just the waste that is left, the many different types of waste that humans leave as travelers, whether it be intentional or unintentional. When you enter an area, we are affecting it, we're polluting it in some way, shape, or form. And then the destinations of high traffic, the most popular destinations, are therefore being polluted at an extremely rapid rate and making it worse to go for travelers. So we've all been to places where the water's gross, wherever it may be. We've also been to places, over-tourism can also be waiting in line 6 hours to go in and see the Louvre. And so there's ways to fight that. Obviously, the places that are buildings, the ways to fight over tourism is to go during off season. I'm a huge fan of traveling in the cold months in winter because how many people we know go to Europe in the summer, right? I like to go in the winter because you're not waiting in those lines. That's one of it. The other thing is to find other things like, the Louvre's great. We'll go to the other art museums as well. And then when it comes to the places that are beaches where you're over tourism with that, then it comes to just being responsible, not feeding the animals, keeping your trash, finding ways to actively clean it up as well, because it's as population increases, more people are traveling throughout the world. As other developing countries, more people are starting to travel, and they're at a higher rate than ever before too. So you're going to see more people as you travel from different countries, especially the countries in the continent of Asia. Over-tourism is a big deal. And if we're not actively helping it, then we're hurting it. And it's not, I mean, it's not even to be debated.
Yeah,
It's a fact. So.
And I had heard you say earlier, we were talking about one of the advantages of travel being meeting people in the cultures that you're visiting, even if that culture is Kansas, right here in North America or someplace. Yeah. But it seems to me, Alaska, of course, is a state that has a lot of tourism. We have a lot of cruise ship tourism, and a lot of our tourism happens between about maybe June 1st and August. I mean, the summer months. We don't have a lot of tourists here in October, November, and we don't have a lot of tourists in April and May. It seems that that locals are a lot more inclined to talk to you as a tourist if you're not there during the tourist season.
Yeah.
I know that we say here in Alaska, the roads are clogged up in late July, early August with campers all over the road. I think you had said, you just mentioned before the interview that you were driving down the Parks Highway. Everybody stopped their car, and you thought, well, we better stop our car because I guess they're looking at something. It turned out to be a big bull moose, and everybody was looking at it. And you had referred to that as, well, I guess that's Alaska culture. But I would say, no, that's Alaska tourism culture because the Alaskans just want to make sure they don't hit the moose with their car. And they're not going to maybe stop to look at a moose, but that's you see a lot less stopping for wildlife in October, November, when the locals are just trying to avoid the wildlife, or not avoid the wildlife, but avoid hitting them.
And for me, as much as I admire being called interesting and a globetrotter, the one thing I despise, and I hope I'm never called, is a tourist.
Yeah.
And there's so many negative connotations that come with it, that to the point that one secret thing that I love on any trip, I cross my fingers that it happens, and when it happens, I'm just elated. And it's probably makes me insane, but I love on any trip when I'm confused as a local. For instance, if I'm asked for directions or something, I was at the Circle line in the London Tube, and a woman came up to me and she said, how do I get to whichever it was? I said, you take the Circle line, it's your third stop. And she looked at me and she said, wait, you're not from here? She goes, I've lived here 20 years. How do you know that? So for me, I get this amazing thrill if I can be confused as local, because I despise the idea of being a tourist. And I know that's silly of me, but I don't want to contribute to the negative aspects of tourists. I want to be someone who's equal to all areas that I go to. So I'm not really a tourist. I'm
a citizen of the world.
I'm a citizen of the world, a la Anthony Bourdain. So,
yeah. I may, personally, I think maybe I've become more comfortable over the years with being a tourist, with sort of the recognition that there's something to learn in these places, and maybe as I've become more humble, I've said, okay, I'm a tourist here. Tell me about it. I don't really know.
Yeah, and I think I'm hearing your approach is that you appreciate the humbleness of knowing that I am here and I'm excited to learn. I'm a visitor. I'm excited to. I'm going to be polite, and I'm excited to just see what you have to offer.
Yeah, and maybe 20 years ago, I wouldn't have wanted to admit that. I would want to say, well, of course, I'm in the Alps. The Alps are my playground.
True.
And now I feel like maybe a little bit more comfortable saying, I don't know everything about this place. It's not like I'm actually from here.
Every place you can learn from, and every single person on earth you can learn something from. Every single person.
You spoke earlier about, and one of the quotes in your book was personal blunders have been my finest professors. Have you gotten into any situations where you really thought, oh, this is it. I've really done it now, Randall. I'm in trouble here.
All the time.
Oh, is that right?
All the time. I mean, really, there have been some major ones, but I try to do a lot of spontaneous things, and in doing so, the freedom of spontaneity has made me make mistakes, and I don't seek mistakes out. I'll never say that, but I will say that I appreciate every mistake that I make, because I do learn things. I've missed flights. I've missed trains. I was in the wrong terminal, and silly mistakes. And when you're in the wrong terminal and then you have to go and buy a flight that's 10 times the cost, whose fault is it? It's your own. I laughed. I was mad for a millisecond, and then I just laughed and I said, you're an idiot, Randall. And then I took care of it, and then I went to Iceland. And I make mistakes all the time. I mean, even most recently in Berlin, I fell, not down the stairs. We've all fallen down the stairs. I fell up the stairs. So I fell up the stairs in one of the busiest train stations in the world, and things like that. I mean, and I realized I was wearing too big of shoes. I mean, I learned from that. So I really was. This is actually true.
You don't have to travel to figure out how to buy shoes.
Here's why. Because they're a different size in Europe. So when I bought the shoe, I was going by the American size, and it was a different size in Europe. So I learned to be more. Pay attention to details of shoes. So I learned from falling up the stairs in Berlin. It was great.
Well, that's that's a story I wouldn't have necessarily expected.
Yeah. I mean, I don't live for the blunders, but they do teach me things. And in the end, when you are by yourself, it's just great to just be like, well, that's what it is. C'est la vie. So, it's great. Like anything, as things go on, they're just the culture spreading. So not a day goes by that I'm not at least asked now about something. I got a friend who's in Rome right now, sending me pictures. And it's just fun because it just spreads, and it's just so much great. It's just so much love to be able to just be in the culture, to be in the travel world, be in the culture. As we are ambassadors, we're sharing. Every time a traveler meets up with another traveler, there's like this instant aura that they both recognize in each other and just know, I want to take your knowledge and I want to give you mine, and I want to just talk for as long. And you can recognize another traveler, and there's this instant fondness, this immediate instant fondness that I don't care where you're at in the world. There's this connection, and I know that you and I had it from the beginning. You and I had this even on email. There was just that.
Right,
let me tell you what I'm doing this week. I'm going here, and and then it spreads, and then you have someone else emailing you and saying, "Hey, any tips for Madagascar?" And even if I've never been there, I'm like, "Yeah, of course. Make sure you go down here and do this." So I look forward to those opportunities to just reach out and say information as well, even if I haven't been to those places. But yeah.
In reading your book, I had referred earlier to some of these smart and solo tips, and you just talked about the problems that you can get into. We talked about getting into trouble and thinking, I'm really in trouble this time, and I think that can be an intimidating thing for people. I find I traveled quite a bit, but I'm a lot more comfortable in the places where I've been, and it has gone okay, than going to a place where. For example, maybe an underdeveloped country where I may feel like, boy, I could really get stuck down here and nobody will ever hear from me again.
I thought about that on the drive down from Denali.
Right, here in the wilderness. And I think that's something that can be very intimidating for people and can cause people not to travel to places that they could do just fine in. I mean, people travel in all these places, locals travel, and people from many other countries go there too. Throughout your book, you have these sidebars, these smart and solo tips. I'm looking at one here that's on one of the pages, and it says choose a lodging place that is close to the metro station and the train. Are there some other tips that you can give people about maybe traveling to a place that they haven't been and they may be intimidated to visit? Are there some universal tips?
Yeah, it's probably because it's the most common, I don't want to say criticism or question that I get, is I can't, and I don't know how, but also I can't take off and go on a trip by myself, because for me it's easy. I'm single and have no children, but my sister, who has a husband and 2 children, her first question is going to be, how can I do this? Oh, I can't go to Europe. How am I supposed to travel solo? I can't. A lot of people kind of push off the idea of, well, I can't do what you do, Randall. I can't go to Europe or wherever it may be for a week. So for me, the first advice, the first tip, and like you said there, throughout the book, there's tips spread in each chapter. But for me, it's just start small. If you want to go into the world of travel, a lot of times people are hesitant to travel, especially some of the more expensive trips, because we don't know if it's worth it. That first time I clicked purchase on a flight to Europe, it was so nerve-wracking. I didn't know if it was worth it. And you start thinking of every other expense you have in your mind. You're like, should I pay this? I shouldn't do this. No, I shouldn't pay for this. No, I shouldn't do this. And then you finally do it because you don't know if it's worth it. Now, everything I realized it's all worth it. So I would say start small, do something that's affordable. Go hike. Go hike for the closest hiking range. Every location in the world has a place to hike. So if you are new to solo travel or maybe you don't have the means or you have a family and you can't get away, just start with a 1-hour solo trip. Go hiking somewhere. And you're going to realize the value of that time alone. And that's my number one advice to anything, for all situations, because it's going to show you that you're going to come back and you're going to say, I want and I need more of that in my life, no matter where you go. And then you can go someplace more extravagant. You can go someplace longer. You can develop a situation where if you're married or if you're in a relationship, you can travel by yourself one time, and then your significant other can travel by themselves. You also, if you have children, you're showing them the value and the importance of being independent. They're not going to always rely on you. They're going to learn how to make food without you, and that's what I would say. I would say start small because it's going to be affordable, and then you can branch out and do more with it, and you're going to just realize the value and how much you love it as well.
One thing that I had experienced when I was traveling a lot for ski racing back in the old days was that I think that often when we travel, and I do this, and I think many, or maybe most people do this as travelers. They say, "Well, I got 2 weeks, and I'm going, and I want to. If I'm traveling around the West, I got to hit the Grand Canyon, Zion, Arches. I got to hit Phoenix. Got to hit L.A. Got to hit Las Vegas. I got to hit Utah, and the mountains in Montana, and the beach in California. And I got 2 weeks, and here's a schedule where I could hit all of those places." And so you're going city to city, doing a lot of traveling. And I do that too. I think most of us do that. I want to hit the good spots. I only have 2 weeks off from work. I got to make this count.
Yeah.
But when I was living in Europe for the winter, because I was ski racing and we were just going from town to town to town, we usually ended up in cross-country ski races happen in sort of out of the way alpine villages or little valleys up in the hills in Scandinavia, or in Japan or wherever the races may be. And upon reflection, looking back, those were the most memorable times. Were those times when we were sort of stuck and kind of bored in a town for 6 or 7 or 8 days. A typical trip, we'd go to some little valley way up in the hills in Italy. You'd get there on a Monday. The race wasn't until the weekend, and there was going to be a World Cup race, and there were going to be 75,000 people there over the weekend. But until then, the first 4 days that you were there, you were in a town of 1,500 people, and I usually found that if you just wander around town, especially with a jacket that says USA on it, people are going to come up and approach you and ask and say, "Oh, you must be here for the ski race." And before long, you're getting invited over to dinner. Now you're meeting local people. And I found that many of those experiences were much more memorable in hindsight and much more valuable to me personally, I think, than the trip to the Eiffel Tower where you saw it like everybody else. So I think that you were talking about over tourism, and the fact that just changing the season may change things. I think that probably going to Iceland in July is a very different experience than going to Iceland in November when there are no tourists there. And so that sounds like that's something that you may advocate for.
Yeah, and I try to do a little bit of balance of both. Like you said, whenever I'm first planning a trip, I get so focused on the puzzle that I describe it of making your allotted time work to what your specifications are. And I try to balance it out. It's like, yes, I'm going to do landmark X because I have to do that and I've always want to see that. But you also have the time in the middle where you're doing something just different. And there are now, it's becoming easier and easier to kind of meet locals and everything. So we all know Airbnb is known for its homes. We know Airbnb. We're staying at Airbnb tonight. Shout out to my host. A great host last night. She left us cookies, by the way. She was fantastic. She's like, "Do you need anything else?" We're like, "Yeah, more cookies, please." It was great. But now they have a new section on Airbnb called Experiences. And you can go to a location. So this is one of the things I do when I go to a location to see if the location's a worthy enough choice. I'll look to see what the experiences are, and on the experiences, it could be lessons. You could get yoga lessons, or you could get, let's just say, a dance lessons in Argentina. Fantastic, right? You can take a yoga lesson outside the Eiffel Tower in Paris. One of the most popular ones in Nice, France, was a dinner provided by a local who she just would have a local dinner. She would cook every night, and you invite the 6 people over, and you would have a dinner with locals. Like, how awesome is that, right? So you're doing something off the path, but you're getting to hang out with local people. So that's just something I found as well, as just using the Airbnb experiences as a way to, I can do my important things. I can go see the monuments, but then I can also just get away and meet someone. They do a lot of tours as well. And for those of you, when you're touring, photographers double as both great photographers. If you're doing solo travel, you need pictures. So they're going to have the pictures you need, but photographers, the best tour guides in any city you've ever found. So if you ever need that, you can jump on there, get yourself a photographer, and have your tour guide as well. And there was the photographer I met in Dublin. She took me around, took me to a pub, and we had a wonderful time in Dublin. I learned just how to cuss like someone from Irish. It was fantastic. So
and you got some great photos.
She was great. She was great.
One of the things you talked about earlier was environmental responsibility in the Emerald Rule, and the fact that you could go and volunteer in a place, or you could pick up trash. You could do your own personal thing that you choose to do to improve the place that you're visiting. One of the things that concerns a lot of people with modern travel is carbon emissions, there are ethical considerations about getting on airplanes and buzzing all over the world, and other forms of transportation too. Are there ways that travelers can mitigate that are relatively easy and don't take a lot of research or a lot of effort on the part of the traveler?
Well, easy is the kind of the interesting word on there. There are steps to take. There can be some hoops to jump in. The easiest thing would be to just be a smart planner, and do as much as you can without those transportations. If you're in Europe, or take the rail system, that's number one. Actually, number one would be, if you can walk, walk. If something close, walk. Walk first, train second, and then cars and planes last. That's number one. There are other opportunities when you're planning these things. Just realizing the importance of the location first.
Yeah,
it's above and all. And if you have that moral guidance, moral compass, a lot of things are going to fall into place. And also, we know that perfection is not the goal. You can't go to Europe with no carbon.
Right.
You can't live with no carbon footprint. It's going to happen. So, but by taking steps to do so, and then one thing that we haven't talked about, but one thing that I love about every trip is that the things that I learn they're not just life lessons. They are life. They augment my life. What I mean by that is everything I've learned on these trips, I take back with me. So every trip before I go, I say to myself, I want to have a virtue that I want to work on. For instance, when I first started traveling, I said, I want this trip to be patience. So I'm going to work on my patience. So when everybody's hustling and they're saying now gates 1 through whatever, and everybody's hustling, I'm like, I'm cool. I'm not going to rush. I'm going to let someone go before me. I'm going to help someone else with their luggage. And I realized that if you can go to the hustle and bustle of all that and travel, again, your daily life's going to be fine. Another virtue trip I had was, I'm going to get 5 email addresses today. And I'm going to meet 5 people. And I'm going to start 5 conversations. And I don't remember if it was domestic or international, but it was just the fact of getting in the habit of smiling and say, hey, talking about your interests. Oh, tell me more about cross-country skiing or whatever it may be. And guess what? When you come back home, you're a better person. You're better at your job. You now have new job skills that are going to be as well. And the one thing we haven't talked about as well is that when you travel, you don't have to be social. Everybody's like, well, how do you be social? Well, the other thing is, maybe you don't want to be social. Maybe the whole trip of going by yourself is, I don't like people.
Yeah, how do you avoid people?
Yeah. So travel gives you, there's 2 opportunities with it, and both are equally important. And I advise anyone who's doing solo travel the first time to embrace both of these. So travel gives you the opportunity to think. Most great thoughts are conceived by walking. That's that's a Nietzsche quote I kind of butchered a little bit, but all great thoughts are conceived by walking. So when you're walking or traveling, you're going to have ample time to think about your thoughts. So when you're out there, don't just think about what you want to eat. Think about your true hopes, your passions, your desires. Think about your next trip you want to do. Think about what you want to fix in your life, what you want to augment, what do you want to get rid of, what you want to add. Think about that. Use that time to make yourself a better person. That's number 1. Deep thoughts. Deep thoughts. And you're going to have ample time to do it. But the other flip side of it is not thinking at all. And I know that sounds like a dichotomy and everything, but it's meditation. So it's knowing that in all that time I'm sitting around waiting, that I'm going to just sit and I'm going to meditate. So for me, one thing I've learned from travel that I've taken back to my everyday life is in all these lines we got to wait on. We got to wait in line for everything. Get your bags. They're calling gate, someone asked me, what gate are you in? They're on gate 3. I'm like, oh, I'm in 13. It's like you're always waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. I don't get mad at those anymore. I see those, I know it sounds cheesy, but I see those as an opportunity. So for me, if I see a line, I say, great, this is a chance for me to meditate. So when I'm in line, I breathe whatever I need into my life. If I'm on a trip and I'm stressed out, I say, I'm breathing patience into my life. I'm breathing peace to my mind. I'm breathing love to my heart. Whatever I need. It's a lot like prayer for those who do that as well. And I use that time to meditate. You're going to have ample times traveling by yourself, so use it to meditate. And it will, when you come back home, you're going to feel a life of tranquility, a life of peace, a life of happiness. And I can tell you, just for everyone listening, that I've happiest, most relaxed I've ever been. And I take every opportunity I can to just meditate and breathe in what I want.
Well, and I suppose travel is often, because, especially in places like airports and train stations, they're naturally stressful.
They're naturally stressful.
And you see that in your fellow travelers when they are abusing the gate agent, when something doesn't go as they expect, which is natural to feel that way. But it sounds like that's that's a great opportunity to practice your patience and your acceptance of the situation.
Because of course it's a stressful place, and if you can master that, that's the doctorate level class. We all drive in rush hour traffic. That's stressful. How do you react to it? Are you going to get frustrated every single time you get cut off? Because it's going to happen. Deal with it. And you're going to get cut. Someone's going to cut in front of you. The next flight you take, someone is going to walk in front of you that shouldn't be walking in front of you. Someone is going to hold up, and there's going to be awkward. They're going to board at the wrong time. It's just going to happen. Your bag's going to get lost. Right. And if you can handle that and learn to teach yourself to be calm during those situations, the rest of life's a breeze. And not only a breeze, but you're just going to enjoy life so much better. You're going to enjoy the trip so much better, and you're just going to be a happier person. And then people are going to come with you on your trips to Alaska.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking to me. Randall Carlton Green, his new book is just recently out. It's called Smart and Solo, The Blueprint for Efficient and Enjoyable Solo Travel. Randall Carlton Green, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for having me. I wish I could spend hours talking to you. And if you purchase it, reach out to me. I'd love to hear your travel stories as well. I'll include you in the next one.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank our producer, Eric Borg, for producing the show. I'm Adam Verrier. Thank you for joining us here on Outdoor Explorer, and I'll see you outdoors.
Outdoor Explorer is a production of KSKA Public Radio in Anchorage, Alaska. Theme music is by Portugal, The Man. Views expressed are those of the participants and do not reflect the station or its underwriters. You can find Outdoor Explorer on Facebook and in your favorite podcast app. To see what's coming up on Outdoor Explorer and add your voice to the conversation, go to our website at alaskapublic.org.
Life Informed. This is Alaska Public Media.